As many of you know, in 1940, the Canadian government was at war with Italy, and as a result, it interned a lot of Italian Canadians, people who were either Italian-born or Canadian-born, were arrested and put in internment camps where people were held for as long as 4 years. Almost entirely men, some of them were women, but it was almost entirely men. They were in fact all innocent. Not one of them was ever found guilty of any crime. A lot of people were humiliated, a lot of them were ruined economically. The community was affected very adversely, and for a long time it was a very taboo subject. People refused to talk about it, people refused to acknowledge that it happened. Finally, around 1992 or 93, Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, apologized for this, the internment, for this slight on the community. And more recently, the government under Stephen Harper created a law that allows organizations to put together projects. And the project that we're putting together is to make people aware of the internment that happened, people who were interned in Montreal and across Canada. The partners in this internment project are Accenti Magazine, Guernica Editions, and the Association of Italian Canadian Writers. And the reason we are here this afternoon is to talk about the project and talk about the internment, and again, create awareness about what transpired more than 70 years ago.
Our project consists of putting together two volumes of material on the internment. One volume is an academic volume having to do with studies from various areas, and the second is a creative volume that we're putting together, which are short stories, poems, whatever, having to do with the internment. We'll be publishing some of the material in Accenti Magazine. That's also part of the project. The purpose, the reason behind all this, well, there has been some material written on the internment before. In fact, looking back, Guernica has published some of this material, but it has never been gathered together. A lot of people don't know about the internment, even now, after all this time. And we're not just talking about Canadians. We're talking also Italian. A lot of Italian Canadians don't know about what happened during this period. So part of the project is to create these books, which will be given away for free. They'll be given away for free. They'll be sent to libraries. They'll be proposed for not necessarily for curricula, but to be used by teachers, if need be, as side volumes, accompanying volumes for Canadian history programs. As you know, I mean, I don't think anyone here ever actually read about this in their Canadian history books when they were going to high school or anything like that, right? We never got it. So part of this would be to disseminate this information much more widely across Canada and the rest of the world as well.
My name is Nick Di Pietro. My father, Giuseppe Di Pietro, was an Italian immigrant, came over in December 1934. He was an 18-year-old man. He was literally, as they say, fresh off the boat. Here in Canada, he was able to find work with his uncle in a shoe factory. And he worked there, and my father's brother, Antonino, had been here since 1930. And he was already working in that same factory. So life was going along quite smoothly until June 10th, 1940, where the RCMP basically rounded up anybody that looked Italian. It really didn't take a whole lot to get arrested. My father spent just shy of 2 years, about 21, 22 months, and my uncle spent close to 4 years in Petawawa and also at the Gagetown in New Brunswick.
Now, your father was interned for 2 years.
That's correct.
When he was released, what happened? How was he released, and how did he reintegrate his society, his community, his family?
Yes, well, in, I guess it must have been around March 1942, there's a prisoner release, and there were some 700 in Petawawa, and he was amongst the first to be released. He was sent by train back to Montreal. In Montreal, he gets a discharge paper that basically says he's released to do what he wishes. However, his resume, he would say, had this gap. And he had been working for the shoe factory. Now the shoe factory was in some sort of trusteeship, so he could not go back to that place of employment. So he basically scratched around for whatever work he could get. And even though he was a bookkeeper, accountant, he was only able to get a job at the Honeydew restaurants. There was a chain of restaurants here in Montreal, and he was the night cashier.
The most common element in all the stories and of all the people that I've spoken to has been silences. And as an oral historian, I'm trained to examine silence and to find out what those silences mean. You have to understand, a lot of people at that time who were interned, and I mean that's another issue, why they were interned, why they were picked up, the percentage that were picked up. There's a lot of discrepancy between the facts and the way people tell the story. It doesn't mean that people are telling you a lie, it just means this is how they remember the story and this is their truth. And there's a reason that their opinions are being formed that way. There was a lot of suffering that happened, more suffering, more so in the homes than it was in the camp. And because people were left on their own. The society that we know today, in terms of how we deal with immigrants today, is not the society that was in Canada in 1930. So really everybody had to fend for themselves.
What do you think is the value of bringing this subject to the fore, of discussing the internment of Italians during the war in Canada?
An examination from various angles of why the internment took place or the results of that is something that's valuable beyond just 600 people interned in the Second World War. I think you can do things about the psychology behind it, the sociological examinations. Is our society today more tolerant versus what it was then? Would it happen today if under similar circumstances? You know, I think it needs to be told, but and this is my but. I think it needs to be a balanced telling. I think that the stories of the people who were interned should make up one portion of what the entire knowledge base should be. The other part has to be, there has to be something about why the Canadian government felt they had to do this. There has to be some studies coming from that side as well.
I'm really concerned about the families and also society as well in terms of passing the story. It's absolutely important that this story be told and be recorded, because you know what, we are part of Canadian history, and we're not just something that should be put into the social sciences section.
If you look at the history books in Canada, there is no record, there is not a mention that Italians were in Canada, much less that they were arrested and interned and held without reason for all those years, and that they were suspected of being spies and you know, turncoats and whatnot. You know, so that's really what the project is about and what it's trying to focus on. Nick, we're very grateful that you're here today. I know that you are, as I guess, and Joyce to some extent as well, directly affected by what happened. When you are asked to attend panels or to participate in events such as these that commemorate the memory of the individuals who suffered, I know you said it's important, but why do you come and why do others not come, in your opinion?
Well, I guess it's in honor of my father and his brother that I feel it's something that's meritorious of being known. Joyce found an interesting article that she sent me It was, I think it was the Montreal Star, probably June 11th or 12th, just a couple of days after. And the writer basically outlines what had happened, and amongst some of the possible options of what should be done with these people, hanging them was one of the suggestions. Back in those days, capital punishment was everywhere. Bordeaux jail had probably 500 executions a year, and this was 1940, and my dad was born in 1916. That made him 24, and my youngest son is 24, and I think, you know, as they say, la paura, you know, to think that my dear dad, who had always tried to be a pretty low-key kind of guy, is now facing possible summary execution for something he had absolutely nothing to do with. I think, you know, in the era that we live in today, there's maybe a fair bit of fear with what may be happening in the world, the terrorism, call it what you will, but we must be careful not to react through instinct and become unthinking in our actions, because it can have tremendous long-term effects. And so we are a community of man throughout, and so we should judge situations upon their merits and not just react instinctively.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful way to conclude this panel. The project is really an initiative in the hope of avoiding that these things can happen in the future. That people will not be singled out for their ethnicity or for belonging to a particular group and somehow be marginalized. So I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. I want to thank our panelists, Michael Mirolla, publisher of Domenic Editions, Pietro, and Joyce Pillarella, and Cusmano. Thank you very much.